Hello vinyl community, this is Graham Allen coming to you from North London. I wanted to talk today about some vinyl finds, some quite obscure vinyl finds, mainly progressive rock from Europe, from some of the European countries. I also wanted to just mention about my sort of approach really to buying vinyl when I'm in Europe. I'm from the UK. Kind of what I do just in terms of pricing, taking a bit of a chance, which I quite like doing sometimes rather than listening to things online. I quite like to take a bit of a chance. I do use a website called Progressive Archive, which people will probably know, Prog Archive. And I prefer just to have a little look at the star rating of the albums and some of the write-ups rather than kind of streaming stuff. I know sometimes I go into shops, and this isn't a criticism of people, but you can see them looking at an album, then just immediately sort of streaming it, having a listen to it. And I quite like taking a bit of a chance on an album, and I'll tell you what I do when things don't kind of quite work out for me. I'm not that keen on an album, how I deal with that. But first of all, let's just go through the albums. So first of all is an Italian progressive stroke jazz fusion band called Il Baricentro, and this album is called Truciant. It's the second album I've got by them. It's not as good as the first one, which I bought online and is basically a remastered copy. This is an original, and it's on the EMI label. There it is. This is interesting because they are basically a keyboard based jazz fusion stroke prog trio, so keyboard, bass and drums, but this album has also got some percussion in there, so it makes it a little bit more Latin-y, a little bit more Fusac-y, so I was a little bit disappointed. And in fact what I may do, I'll give this a few more listens, but I may sell this on Discogs. And this is kind of an example of something where I had a little listen to the opening track before I went actually, and I bought this one in Amsterdam, but I kind of bought it and I'll give it a few more listens, and if it doesn't click then I'll probably just sell it on. So slightly disappointed. Price was pretty good, and it's in very good shape, but if you like jazz fusion stroke prog with a lot of mellotron, organ and some synths, predominantly Mini Moog, then Il Baricentro are a really interesting band, and they're from Italy. In a similar proggy vein, and again I got this from Amsterdam, a great shop called Concerto in Amsterdam, which a lot of people will know about that are from that region. Harold from Harold's Prog Rock Show mentioned it, and actually advised me to go there, so thanks to Harold. This is an American band from the 70s called FM, and this is their debut album called Black Noise, not to be confused with a band called FM later on in the 80s that put out a cover version of Stairway to Heaven by Led Zeppelin and was predominantly members of Toto, sort of fairly AOR type stuff. This is a little bit AOR, but it's got a much more proggy bent. Again, I quite like unusual lineups. So this lineup has keyboards, which are very dominant, bass, not bass, well, the bass is the keyboard player, but they actually have a electric violin player, and there's some mandolin, and this guy also plays glockenspiel. He's called Nash the Slash. He's no longer with us. And there's a drummer and main guy Cameron Hawkins, and this is just very good mid-70s prog from America, so it's got that slightly more pompy feel to it, but it's really enjoyable. I'm going to be hanging on to this. That's FM, Black Noise, Really, really good album, actually. Really, really enjoyed listening to this, and we'll be hanging on to this. Okay, so this was the absolute find for me in Amsterdam. Been looking for this for quite a while, and you can see another album by this band. But it's the debut album by SFF, who are a German progressive rock trio. So you'll see a bit of a theme here, the keyboard dominated trios. They're actually called Schick, Furs and Fröhling, shortened to SFF, and this is Symphonic Pictures. This is from, I think it's 1973, and it's on the Brain label. People will know the Brain label, has a very good reputation in Germany. And this is just really, really good. As the Brain label, the classic sort of green. This is quite dark, very, very symphonic, very keyboard dominated progressive rock in a trio format. It's instrumental only, so people that like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, UK would enjoy this. It's got some fantastic stuff on it, and you can almost tell. Pictures are probably quite small there for the camera, but we've got, you know, drum kit with gongs in the background. We've got a mini Moog on top of an organ there, and we've got actually a double neck guitar, Rickenbacker bass, and there's a kind of half Gibson, I think it is, on top of it. So that kind of stuff often I find, you know, I'm probably going to be like something with those sort of instrumental setups. But it really is excellent, very, very good. Side two is just called Pictures, and it's just a epic of 16 minutes 23. Just the sort of thing I like, really driving keyboard dominated progressive rock. So that's SFF, or Schick, Furs, Fröhling, Symphonic Pictures. And I also got a second album called Sunburst when I was in Amsterdam. This one isn't as good. It's kind of interesting. This one was about €30, and this one was less than half than that. And that's simply because this is much more sought after. Okay, and then almost inevitably, if you're in Amsterdam, I hadn't got this. It was the debut album by another keyboard trio called Trace. This is Rick van der Linden, who's a well-known keyboard virtuoso, and Pierre van der Linden, who played with Focus on drums, and Jaap van Eyck on bass. And this is just very keyboard-dominated progressive rock, very symphonic, so they kind of take classical structures. So anyone that likes Emerson, Lake and Palmer will like this. They're often referred to as the sort of Euro version of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, along with Triumvirate, the German group, who are also a keyboard-based trio. This is on the Philips label. Delighted to get this. Don't see it that often in the UK. Really nice version of it. Really good price. Again, got this from Concerto in Amsterdam, which was a brilliant record shop. So absolutely delighted to get that. I'd got this online. This is Birds, a second album by Trace. Interestingly, with Ian Mosley from Marillion on drums, but I prefer this. This is the debut. So absolutely delighted to get that. So that was the trip to Amsterdam. I should just say it was a fantastic place. The record shops were all pretty much within walking distance. I mean, a fair walk to get round all of them. And there were between 12 to 15 shops. Some of them quite small, some of them much bigger. Some, you know, probably didn't have much of the sort of stuff I was looking for. I tend to go to things like krautrock, Euro rock sections, anything progressive, and they all have pretty good sections. So it was a really good trip, and it was enjoyable walking around Amsterdam. It was bustling, but really good to get those that I hadn't seen for, certainly some of those I'd never seen in the UK, and one or two of them really hard to get in the UK as well. So just last up, wanted to mention this. This was I got this from a Oxfam charity shop in North London. Very shocked to see it, to be honest. This is Eberhard Werber. He's an ECM labeled bassist from Germany. He plays solo bass on this. The bass is actually a customized, it's sort of an upright bass, but cutaway, and it's electric. So it has a sort of an upright cello, I should say, rather than bass. So it has that very warm, fretless sound that I really like. And it's classic ECM. I mean, you can almost tell by the cover there. It's this sort of minimalist, sometimes quite dreamy, ethereal, typical ECM. And there's a little story here, because I got this for 10 quid. I couldn't believe it, really, seeing an Eberhard Werber album in Oxfam. There it is, quite interesting. It's got promotional copy, not for sale. The interesting thing was when I got it home, it looked great. It's been stored in a sort of a poly sleeve. Certainly can't see any sort of scratches on there, but it's very noisy. And I think it might be a mixture of the storage and possibly being played a lot. But I'm sure we've all been in that position where something looks absolutely pristine and it's just got lots of hum and scratches, sort of fairly small scratches. I'm going to keep trying to play it and clean it, and see if I can get the sound a little bit better. But a little bit disappointing. I mean, 10 quid is very good for an ECM album. You just don't see them in charity shops, but also a little bit disappointing because there's a lot of surface noise. So that's Eberhard Werber, and the album is called The Following Morning. Okay, so just the last thing, and it really is not so much, well, it is progressive rock, but it's also jazz fusion-y. And this is a band from the Netherlands called Finch. People might know them quite well, particularly from that area. They were around in the 70s. It's just good, well put together, symphonic prog stroke jazz fusion. It's called Galleons of Passion, and the album is by Finch. They did a number of albums. The early ones are kind of revered more. This again was from the shop Concerto. I sometimes keep my little receipts because it's just nice remembering about the trips and when you were actually there, the dating of them as well. This is on the Rockbur Records label, and is in really good condition. So I was delighted to get that. It's an original copy of Finch. So if you like symphonic progressive rock, stroke jazz fusion, great band to check out. And I think John Bellamy has shown some albums by Finch on his channel. So really glad to find that. Galleons of Passion by Finch. I said I'd finished there. I've just got one more album. I just want to mention this because I know Rob Ison has mentioned this on his channel, and I'm so in agreement with him about represses and the quality of them. So I was very excited to see this in a local record shop in London. It's a remaster of an absolute classic, but fairly out there, progressive rock album from Italy. It's called YS, and the band is called Il Balletto di Bronzo, so Bronze Ballet. They didn't do many albums. Very typical sort of story of prog rock in Italy sometimes. You get a full-on bombastic album, sort of launched, probably didn't sell many, and has become a kind of a classic, a retro classic. The originals just go for an absolute fortune, as you can probably guess with these things, because there wouldn't have been many of them pressed. They've all been repressed because there's a bit of money in it. And this is actually a 2021 Italian repress. They're on the Polydor label, so they had a reasonable deal. And it's absolutely pristine in terms of the cover. The cover is absolutely immaculate, reproduces the original art. However, this is, well, first of all, very spectacular on red vinyl, but it's noisy, and I've cleaned it. You know, there's nothing else I can really do with it, and I'm just a bit disappointed really in the quality of the pressing with this. You know, it's a VG plus. That's what the store has put on there. It doesn't look as though it's actually been played very much. I'm convinced it's just the pressing. It's just not great. And I know Rob mentioned that he now is actually quite wary of buying some of these remasters, which are not cheap. This would have been probably, you know, 30 quid plus to buy new. Yes, I've got it a lot less than that, but just a bit disappointed with the pressing. And I think it's interesting that all these other albums I mentioned, I mean, some of them are 45, 47 years old, but the sound on those is better than Il Balletto di Bronzo. So it was really, I just wonder what people thought of that, about the remasters. I know you hear that there's many phenomenal remasters, and it is interesting how some seem to come out really well and others just very disappointing. And I know sometimes when I've bought new sort of repressed albums, I bought a couple of Italian prog albums, even taking them out the sleeve, and sometimes they're in these sleeves where they're virtually stuck in with static, but you kind of notice quite a lot of debris in the white sleeve, and that sort of tells me really that it's just been put in there with lots of kind of presumably factory kind of dust and debris getting in there. So you wonder about quality control as well. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that, and speak to you all soon.